Hello and welcome to How I Hire, the podcast that taps directly into the best executive hiring advice and insights. I'm Roy Notowitz, founder and CEO of Noto Group Executive Search. You can learn more about us at notogroup.com. As a go-to firm for purpose-driven companies, we've been lucky to work with some of the world's most inspiring leaders as they've tackled the challenge of building high-performance leadership teams. Now I'm sitting down with some of these very people to spark a conversation about how to achieve success in hiring and create purposeful leadership for the next generation of companies. Today, I'm sitting down in person with Heather Flynn. She's a talent acquisition expert with an extensive resume recruiting for major brands such as ASML, Nike, and Intel. She most recently served as the SVP of Talent Acquisition at Aritzia, where she's applied decades of experience developing talent strategy, scaling recruitment, and delivering transformational results. In our discussion, she shares key advice to enhance any organization's approach to finding and retaining top talent. Together, we talk about the essential role of holistic recruitment strategy, contextualizing talent data to heighten its organizational impact, and crucial ways that employers can compete in a challenging talent market. Heather, thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here in your studio.
Let's start with you walking us through your career journey.
So you hired me to be a recruiter at Intel, and I was coming from a search firm where I was doing sales. So that was really my first recruiting job you hired me into. So thank you.
I remember our interview.
That was great. So that was the start. So over 25 years ago. And since then, my career has, I'd like to say, progressed. Sometimes it felt like it went sideways, but I've worked for some smaller companies, some startups, mid-size, and then two really large companies at both Nike and ASML. And I have led the functions. And then I've also, like when I was at Nike, been part of the leadership team and had a team of really amazing peers that I worked with. And that was a great experience. My career has been in always recruiting, leading teams, and in retail, biotech, and technology. And so it's been pretty great. And it's definitely a career that I didn't know about when I went to college, but something that I fell into and I love it.
I don't think anybody knows about recruiting until it happens to them.
Until they're in it. Yeah.
So what was your first job in high school or college, and what did that teach you about people? And how did that help you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town, Forest Grove, Oregon, population 11,000 when I was living there. I'm not sure what it is now. And it's an agricultural town. And so the job that I had was I worked at a fruit processing plant. I think I was 14 years old, so between my freshman and sophomore year.
Wow.
And I was working swing shift and graveyard. And the fruit was picked every day, so it had to be processed every day. So we worked 7 days a week for probably 6 to 8 weeks straight.
Wow. And this was in the summers?
In the summers.
Okay. And you're 14. They allowed 14-year-olds?
I think that's, again, we're really dating ourselves. I think that was back when you literally had a work permit card and you could show that your parents said it was okay for you to work. And it was a lot of hours and it was a lot of hard work. And I was quality control and the forklift driver. So it was
two very different
things.
Sounds like fun because you could taste stuff and you could drive a cool forklift.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a lot of work. And what was interesting about it, I did it for 7 summers.
Wow.
And it was very
I can't
hard.
even imagine.
And it really was eye-opening. And it wasn't anything I had really been exposed to before. And it taught me how, like, even when you're working really hard, you can find good friendships and relationships and find the fun in the work.
What is it about recruiting that's made it an enjoyable and rewarding career for you?
Early on, the first time, like when you hired me at Intel and I went from being in sales to being a recruiter, the first thing that I really noticed was that people called you back. And I was like, this is amazing, right? Now I'm not selling something. I'm trying to talk to somebody about a job. And so they'll call you back. And that was really interesting. Early on, I felt what was really great about the career was if I was a recruiter and I was working with, I don't know, at the time, a director or a senior director or a VP because I was filling a job for them, I had this exposure so quickly to senior level executives. And I really liked that. And I would take those opportunities when I would have a one-on-one to do an update on the role that we were searching for. I would start talking to them about different things. And I felt like it gave me all these informal mentors. And it really taught me a lot about the leadership skills. I was able to learn and glean skills from a variety of leaders. So that's what I loved.
And you had a pretty big team at Nike as well, right? How many?
Nike was probably, I'd say 15 directs. And then indirectly, it was much bigger because I was leading the North America geography, which at the time it was about 14 billion. The largest team I led was at ASML, and that was probably close to about 130 when I left there. And the full scope of the work, which included the employment branding and operations and university and all of those pieces.
So why is talent strategy important? What are the components of a holistic talent strategy, and how does that tie to the business strategy?
Fundamentally, a talent strategy is going to be core to any organization's business strategy. And it's going to basically mean you're going to have the right people in the right roles at the right time to like propel the business forward. The components of that are super complex, and there's probably 10 key things. And most organizations have some of this going on, some of it going really well, but usually not all of it. And even if they have all of it, those groups are maybe at a different level of maturity within the organization. So first off, talent acquisition, which I know we'll get deeper into, workforce planning, which is the forecasting future talent needs, employment branding, positioning the company to be an employer of choice, onboarding and integration, learning and development, performance management, right, where you're aligning individual goals with the organizational needs, succession planning, so you're prepared for the future with what your leaders need.
Nike was really good at that.
Nike was the best at that. Yeah. And I think at all of the organizations I've been at, I think Nike is the furthest along on almost all of
A lot of companies
these.
really fall short there.
Yeah. The succession planning. The last few would be engagement and retention, making sure that you're an organization where people want to work. And then DE&I, how are you making sure that your company represents the consumers and clients that you're serving, and making sure that you have the best diverse team. And then the last part, which could be maybe the most important part, is the technology and data analytics. A lot of data, and a lot of organizations either have the data and don't know how to analyze the data, or the data that they have isn't really great because it's a little bit of garbage in and garbage out. But those, I think, are the components that make a holistic talent strategy.
What trends, challenges, opportunities are top talent acquisition leaders at leading global companies thinking about or focused on currently?
For global TA leaders, it's balancing efficiency with experience, like being able to do more with less. Budgets are getting cut. People aren't sure. It's an unstable market. What are we doing? People may not want to hire. And so if you can have a proactive strategy, great. And as long as you're agile, because there's always going to be things that come at you that you're not expecting. And so you have to have some agility and fluidity like built into your function as business changes. Candidates are a little untrusting, like there's layoffs going on with this market uncertainty. People aren't going to be really interested in making a move.
Right.
And so like being super authentic and having the brand that really speaks to the candidates that you want to attract, and then having, recruiters really be strong with their communication and engagement. I think that matters. And then lastly, this has been a conversation for 2 years, but I would say really in the last year, AI and the ethical concerns that it may or may not have. And AI to some organizations, and especially recruiting organizations, may seem like it's so far out there. I'm just trying to fill these 4 jobs right now. I don't know about AI, but it's here. It's here. And it's in all of the tools that you're using. It's in your tech stack if you're on LinkedIn or your ATS or your candidate scheduling tool. So it's out there. So you need to understand it. You need to be able to speak to it. You need to be able to know that things are going to change in the future. It's just another thing that's going to be evolving and changing. But if you can hook into it early, if you go back to like balancing process efficiency, AI could eliminate so much of the administrative, low-level work that your
Yeah.
team is doing.
What are the key building blocks or elements of a successful talent acquisition strategy? What are the KPIs, the objectives, and things that you're looking at?
So I think you want to make sure that you are aligned with what matters at your organization. You really have to know what impact and what your company cares about and your leaders. So that said, there's one metric that I love, and I think I've introduced it at almost every organization I've been at since Nike days, but I call it time to identify. And I'm sure I didn't come up with it. But what I think time to identify does is it tells me how good my recruiters are. How well do they know the market? How well do they know the business leader? How well do they know where these
Right.
candidates are that we're looking for? And that metric is from the time the rec is open and you've done the strategy intake meeting with the hiring manager to the time that the recruiter presents or pushes that
Yeah.
candidate to the hiring manager.
Right. How long it took them to find the one that they're going to hire.
Right. And so you're thinking with this, you go, okay, then after that, how long it takes to actually get the offer accepted. There's a lot of variables in there that recruiting doesn't own, that we can't impact as much. So I'm like, I myself and my team shouldn't be held accountable for a time to fill metric. We can influence it, we can help make it better. Somebody goes on vacation
Yeah.
or they can't meet, or we're flying people out for 3 rounds of interviews, right? I think definitely like time to fill, time to start, quality of hire. I think this is important, and typically that's after the fact. And usually it is a measurement that comes from the hiring manager. How fast did they onboard? Are they being productive? Are they delivering what you've asked? Like those are the questions, and you're asking the hiring manager. So it is somewhat subjective
Yeah.
because there's also the halo effect.
Right.
But then I think you would go a year later and look at their reviews
Right.
and ratings. So that's a long-term play. I will say I haven't been at a lot of organizations that do that or do that very well in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Offer accept rate formula, it matters for sure when you're doing volume recruiting. You know, if you have to have 500 people starting to open a retail store, and you know there's 10% fallout, that variable is you really need to hire 550 people. That's
Right.
a big difference, right? Source of hire is one of my favorite metrics. I think it speaks to quality in the moment, right? Like where are most of your hires coming from? And if you know they're coming from employee referrals, let's do all we can to amplify that channel, right? If we know they're coming from a very specific university or I don't know, a job posting, whatever that is, let's get after that, spend more resources and time amplifying those channels, but also knowing we should always be investing and looking at additional channels to feed the funnel. Cost per hire is one that people like to talk about a lot. That one has so many variables. Do you include relocation costs? Do you not? But you can come up with a baseline of that. For me, that's never really been something I've tracked unless that's
Right.
been something that somebody else has wanted me to track. And I think one of the big things that really matters is candidate experience. One of the things that always stood out for me, and it comes back every year, time and again, the number one reason why candidates leave the interview process is that they feel their time was disrespected. And so there's all these opportunities where candidates are thinking, if this is how you are when you're interviewing me and trying to get me here,
Right.
what's it going to be like when I'm here?
So when you step into an organization, how do you assess the current hiring bar and begin to define or evolve what good looks like in that organization?
Yeah, so I have had a couple of times I've been hired into a newly created role. I will say there's 4 things that I would look at. And one is the recruitment maturity model. Like, where is the organization in the evolution, right? Is it survival, stabilize, optimize, or innovate? Ranking that. Then you look at the org assessment, which would be the people, process, technology, and culture. And culture is maybe how the company operates and where they put recruiting in the mix there. The hiring manager maturity model, which is relatively new, and really assessing the hiring managers that you work with and if they are advocates of the process.
It's so variable, the degree to which a hiring manager or executive is capable of evaluating and assessing candidates. How do you figure that out?
Right.
And how do you help those individuals who maybe aren't as capable or competent.
And like, how do you get people to care about it? I mean, that's one of the things I think that talking about it versus their actions and what the hiring managers or business leaders of an organization do to really become like this culture of recruiting. And I think that is a big unlock, not because it's not my job as the recruiting leader to do that, but
Yeah.
because it's really everybody's job to be a brand ambassador and helping be an attractive place that people want to work. What you could call like the high point of that would be a talent champion. And there's somebody that's like deeply embedded in like the professional organizations of their business. They're out at speaking events and they're like a attractor to people and, helping others. And like you talked about, people know how to ask questions, but do they know how to assess an answer when it comes
Right.
back and knowing what good looks like?
Right. And are they being consistent with the
Exactly.
candidates?
Exactly. I always think that's one of the biggest unlocks because
Yeah.
I can help train and upskill my team and I can structure them in the right way and do that. But the big unlock is that hiring manager, business leader engagement.
So what do you do to raise that bar for the hiring executives so that they are at the best that they can be
Yeah.
for hiring?
I think there's several things that you can do, but if you look at the data, you could pull apart the applicant funnel and see if people are falling out of the funnel. Are they opting out? If that's the case, why is that? And if you can use some of those talking points to go back to your business leaders to say, we're losing talent because we're not getting back to them fast enough, we're not getting feedback. When we're asking them questions, we're asking them the same question 10 times, even though we have all these different interview guides, right? So can you make sure that your process is streamlined? Do you have the right interview templates and guides? Are you leading a brief to talk about what are the jobs, the competencies? Roy, what are you responsible for when you're interviewing this candidate? What am I responsible for? Get your fundamentals in line. And then after that, it would be some basic interview training, I think. How do you ask questions like, what are you listening for in these answers? Do you know the values of the organization? Can you clearly articulate those? It seems like simple stuff, but sometimes the simple stuff isn't easy. You just have to really like delve into it. And always, if you can use the data to help inform those conversations with your business leaders, I think it pushes you further along.
So how do you help like hiring teams get to the best decision or choice if they have 2 or 3 really good candidates to consider?
So one thing is trying to figure out how are decisions made in your organization, right? And does the hiring manager have the ultimate say? And who influences them? I think in recruiting, we are, for lack of a better term, like the gatekeepers, right? We should only be letting through really great talent. We should also be pushing our leaders to think differently, open the aperture, look at skill sets in a tangential way versus somebody that's worked for a retailer before is all I want. Why? Can't you bring somebody in from a tech company that's going to have a different way of working? Like, I think that is the role of recruiting to help push. And when recruiters have great relationships with their business leaders, they can do that. When you get to a debrief session and you're talking about candidates and you have 3 great candidates, then I think you really want to push the leader to be like, is there somebody here that you see that could be is the next generation, right? Not what you need right now. What's the future state of the organization? And you should know that, and the business leader should know that, so that you're thinking, okay, how did the candidates stack up for what you need right now and aspirationally, like where we're going as an organization in the future? And looking at your team, is there a specific gap that one of these 3 people fill that that would set you apart? But those conversations won't even happen if you don't have really strong talent advisors that are willing to speak up versus just listening to the conversation that's happening.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So what's the weirdest or most surprising thing that you've ever seen on a resume?
Yeah. Okay. So way back in 2002-ish, a candidate came into the office and brought his resume printed out on a sheet cake.
Oh, Interesting.
It was pretty amazing.
I've never seen that.
Never seen it. And it was so great because, of course, like we took it and we read the resume and we ate the cake. I want to say it was like somebody in call, like he really was trying to get an entry level job and it just wasn't working in the traditional ways.
So he
it was
tried
really
to be
good.
memorable. That's funny. What do large, fast-growing global consumer brands look for in a leader, and how has that profile changed over the last 5 years?
So, as we know, in the last 5 years, right, it's been a very interesting, maybe volatile time, a lot of things happening. But I will say this, one of the things that you need if you're a consumer focused brand, like every executive needs to be consumer obsessed, right? They need to have that consumer mindset, whether you're in finance, marketing, or HR, right? That's just a given. I think the global agility and local sensitivity is something where you have to have this broad global mindset, but the local sensitivity of the regions and the markets where you're doing business. You always want leaders that can represent and speak to your values, know the products, the clients, making sure your company is sustainable and, that those are the things that matter, but really being purpose driven. And then in the last 5 years, I think what's gotten even more important, everything else, is like really data driven decision making. We talked about AI tools, like how are those embedded throughout your organization? And if they are or aren't, and if you are or you aren't using them, you need to know what they are and the impact that they could have and be able to make the case to your CEO or whoever your executives are to have those tools in your organization. And then just resilience, having some agility and resilience because things are constantly changing. And how can you be this calm when things are stormy so that your team feels safe and secure and that you've got this, we've got this. And there's that mindset that you have to have as a leader and always have, but I think even more so now because even a leader that's been through everything is getting new things thrown at them in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about hiring for your own team. So Aritzia is a super hot brand based in Canada, but all over. And can you tell me a little bit about what that was like working for such a really hot brand?
It is definitely a hot brand. And my daughter is 18 and she is bonkers and all of her friends are bonkers for that brand. And, Aritzia does an incredible job of creating these beautiful spaces and beautiful clothes and everyday luxury. And it's a bit of a rocket ship right now.
Mhm.
I think what's hard is that it's a very well-known brand. It's 40 years old. So in Canada, it's really well-known. And here in the US, it's one of those, if you know, you know. But in some markets, it was pretty unknown. And so recruiting and hiring to open some of those stores was more challenging than it should have been, I thought. And so we did a lot of work with branding. We tried some new things with paid media campaigns that really took off on the socials because we were going for, our target market and really helping to educate the business leaders there on who the target audience is in the US for employees and who we want to go after and the different channels we're going to need to go to because we can't just count on our reputation. That is very Canada centric.
Right.
So I think that's been eye-opening for the organization and we've had some strong success with that.
It's a cool job. And I know it was a big job. So as you think about the future, what's next? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about getting one more big global TA job. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be. I'm looking at retail, tech, biotech. I'm excited about working with some really great people.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in. I think you're going to land someplace amazing, I'm sure. And I look forward to seeing that and continuing to work together.
I know, it's so exciting. I mean, it's so funny to think we've known each other for...
It's been like 25 years.
It's unbelievable. And it's just been great. It's so fun how our paths like continue to weave in and out and so many people that we know.
Yeah, that's been the best part is all these relationships, not just within talent acquisition and recruiting. That's a pretty close community. A lot of us know each other, but just all the amazing leaders and people that we get to talk to and work with on a day-to-day basis it always keeps it exciting and interesting.
It's super exciting. And I guess I could just close this off by saying I owe it to you because you hired me way back in the day. It was my first recruiting job.
I saw your potential.
You saw it.
I think there was a few other people involved in that hiring, like Jessica and a few other people that were in that interview. But you did a great job too there and always had a great attitude and it served you well.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thanks so much for being here, and we'll hopefully have you back when you're in your new job.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you. This was a real treat.
Thanks for tuning in to How I Hire. Visit howihire.com for more details about the show. How I Hire is created by Noda Group Executive Search. To find out more about us, visit nodagroup.com. You can also sign up for our monthly email job alert newsletter there and find additional job search strategy resources, as well as more content on hiring. This podcast was produced by Anna McLean. To learn more about her and her team's work, visit aomclean.com.